working in this space for quite some time. And for those of us who have seen the videos that you've shown us and what we've seen online, there are some people who think this is still sort of science fiction. Maybe you can just say a few words about what's happening right now and what you're really seeing.
Sure. Essentially what we're doing is reading out signals from the brain, so action potentials from arrays that are placed into the motor parts of the cortex right now. Now, interestingly, and we can maybe talk about this a little more if we have time, we also have sensors placed in a slightly different part of the brain that we think is more language related, or we thought was more language related, but turns out that it probably has something to do with higher levels of processing. But the sensors that we have placed in the motor regions of the cortex are reading out brain activity that's associated with our participant attempting to speak. And then a machine learning algorithm takes that brain activity, associates it with the speech sounds, the phonemes that she's attempting to make, and then outputs a line of text. And then on top of that, we put a language model. And right now we're using what's called a trigram model, which is a fairly simple language model, but we think that with improvements in the language model, our performance could get better and better over time.
Yeah. What was really amazing was not just the idea that you have it in the motor cortex, but that you can decode whole words. A lot of people might be surprised to know that, maybe if they'd seen something from BCI back in the day, maybe it was a cursor moving or a very slow typing. This seems a lot faster.
It's one of the most interesting findings, I would say, is that we've found distinct parts of this part of the brain called the precentral gyrus, where one of our sensors does the traditional thing that you might expect, responding to movements,
Sure.
But the other sensor really responds more to words, more to phonemes,
Wow.
and has future prediction as well, so can predict many phonemes into the future.
That is super cool. So how, maybe let's put this in context, right? You have been working with individuals who have ALS or other sort of damage to their communication production systems. What is it like to work with someone and to be able to decode speech? Like, what does that feel like? How does that impact you?
I have a personal connection to this with my father being injured in a car accident when I was young,
Yeah.
and having difficulty communicating with him, and to see the system actually working felt like I came full circle.
That's amazing.
Decades of work has come to fruition. So
Absolutely.
It's really exciting.
Yeah, I was a DARPA program manager during the earliest days of sort of what was happening with revolutionizing prosthetics, and for me to be able to see the transition of this technology has been pretty incredible. One of the things you mentioned in your talk was what needs to happen in order for this technology to be deployed and commercialized. Can you say just a little bit about that, and where are the areas that need the most work?
This is proof of principle, obviously. We've shown you can do it, we've shown how, and the rest of it is, believe it or not, much easier, although it's still difficult. The rest of it has to do with miniaturizing systems, making them fully implantable,
Yep.
battery powered, always on, and that takes resources.
Yeah.
There are companies that are pursuing this.
Yeah.
Neuralink being one,
Yep.
Paradromics another,
Yeah.
Synchron, Tom Oxley is here today.
Yeah.
So there are a number of companies in this space. Really excites me about it is
Yeah.
that those are the kind of resources that you need to take these big, bulky, difficult to use systems and make them into something that can be placed into people's homes.
Yeah. As an investor, a neuroscientist myself and an investor, putting this type of capital to work has been, I think, really critical for the field, because it could, just remain in sort of research for quite some time, but I think we're really starting to see that transition. You talked a little bit about what you could do with more electrodes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because that's obviously one area that many of the companies who are developing this in this space are working on.
Recently published a paper in Nature, and as part of that paper, as part of the analysis that we did, we looked at the effect of dropping channels out on the decoding accuracy. And what we found was that there was a log linear relationship, meaning that the more channels you have, the better your accuracy, and it wasn't saturating. I mean, it was just the curve just kept going without flattening out.
Yeah.
And so the hypothesis was that more channels, better decoding, more information. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And it turns out that really is the case. And so I don't want to say too much about it because it's ongoing work.
Right.
But there is good evidence that that really works, that we can get down to single digits in terms of errors, which begins to get close to what you can do with a commercial text or voice recognition system.
Yeah. Which of course then speaks to the commercialization piece of this, right?
Literally.
Literally. I like to always anchor things in sort of reality, right? There's folks who have said, oh, brain-computer interfaces are going to be used by everyone. Brain-computer interfaces are going to be used by a small population of individuals. There's probably something in between that. Right now we have individuals with unmet need. Just talk about maybe the populations and
Sure.
the populations that might use this technology.
Yeah, and a little bit of it depends on what you mean by a brain-computer interface.
Sure.
So this very specific technology that is using sensors to read out motor activity and to do things with it in the outside world, that's a small population. These are people with paralysis, people with ALS.
Yep.
It's a small but needy population,
Absolutely.
which is, of course, why I'm interested in
Right.
it. But if you think of brain-computer interfaces on sort of a larger scale, meaning sensorized closed-loop systems that provide both sensing and stimulation and can do so at finer and finer scales, then you do begin to get into broader categories like addiction, mental health, restoration of many different functions, stroke, treatment of epilepsy. I mean, there are already systems, fundamentally pretty basic with a small number of electrodes that are effective for epilepsy, but we could do so much better with more capable systems.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think about when I think about the future of where neurotechnology and brain-computer interfaces are headed, is not only reading out, but putting energy into the brain, and maybe even combining some of these technologies together. Have you thought about that, or have you experimented with that at all?
Well, we haven't in our laboratory, but certainly, that's the basis of building replacement circuits for the brain. You've got a broken piece and you need to route around it. You need both output and input.
Yeah. I think that's been a big observation that I've had over the last couple decades, is sort of this systems level understanding of the brain, and sort of like you talking about repairing that circuitry. I think that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, and I think this type of technology provides us that opportunity. So working towards assistive technologies means that we have the opportunity to explore fundamental neuroscientific principles, which then lead to more technology, which then lead to more exploration. And so it's a sort of a virtuous cycle that lets us learn more and more about the brain and build more capable systems for people with paralysis. Different approaches and technologies and ways of thinking that can be brought together under one umbrella. And I think having that sort of crosstalk between people who are, all the way from philosophy to ethics to hard science to entrepreneurs and investors, I think it's a creative mix that good things can come out of.